Hey guys, tonight we wander through the misty, lantern-lit streets of ancient Chang'an, where the scent of sizzling scallion pancakes dances on the breeze, and someone, probably you, is stumbling home with an empty stomach and a pocket full of copper coins. There's a low hum from a nearby tea house, a clatter of bowls from a fish ball vendor, and the flicker of firelight casting shadows that stretch out like lazy dragons across cobbled alleys. And somewhere in this hazy nocturnal maze you'll stumble on something remarkable, a food culture that doesn't wait for you to sit down. Because, spoiler alert, the Tang Dynasty may have been known for poetry, opulent silks, and celestial bureaucracy, but it also quietly invented something far more useful to your modern midnight cravings, the humble takeout box. Yep, that stained carton in your fridge has imperial roots. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're still awake by the end, drop your location and local time in the comments. I'm always amazed to see where and when you're listening from. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge past a noodle cart with steam hissing into the cold night air, your stomach growling louder than the flute music echoing down the lane. It's well past curfew, but Chang'an never really sleeps. The Tang capital is a gridlocked sprawl of wonders markets bursting with dates and dumplings. Foreign traders peddling cinnamon and back-alley chefs flipping meat skewers like it's performance art. The city pulses with life, and it's not unusual for hungry scholars and soldiers to go hunting for a bite long after sundown. Let's be honest, you're one of them. And thankfully, food vendors in this golden era know their audience. One by one, they've learned that people don't always have the time or permission to plop down for a 10-course banquet. Sometimes you need to grab your pork bun and dash back to the stables. Sometimes your sweetheart waits in the pagoda garden with chilled plum wine and no patience for delays. And so over time, the clever cooks of Chang'an begin to adapt. It starts with baskets. Woven from split bamboo or reed, small enough to carry under one arm, these simple containers become lifelines for anyone on the go. They're light, they breathe just enough to keep food fresh, and they make a pleasant thump when you set them on a wooden table. You may not realize it, but as you clutch your warm basket of stir-fried lotus root and dried tofu, you're holding a prototype, the great-grandparent of your modern takeout box. But baskets don't just materialize out of thin air. Behind each one is a whole ecosystem of laborers, harvesters, and crafters, mostly unseen. Somewhere outside the city, a farmer sharpens a curved blade and slices tall stalks of bamboo with a rhythm he's practiced since childhood. In another corner of the empire, a widow weaves the reeds tight enough that soup won't spill, but loose enough that steam won't ruin your dumplings. Each basket is a little miracle of engineering, even if it smells faintly of the riverbank where it was born. Of course, not everyone's impressed. Some grumble that takeout encourages laziness or worse, undermines the art of dining together. One elderly Confucian scholar, you pass him now half asleep on his porch, believes that real meals require shared bowls, synchronized chopsticks, and an elder to pour the wine. He'd faint if he saw you eating taro fries straight from a pouch while squatting on a temple step. Still, convenience wins hearts and bellies. Before long, food vendors start getting creative. They layer different dishes inside stackable containers. They add lids woven from palm leaves to trap in the heat. And soon late-night meals become their own kind of ritual. You get used to the rhythm, the hush of footsteps, the clink of coins, the sharp scent of garlic sizzling in oil. A quirky rumor floats through the market stalls that the emperor himself once had a favorite duck dish delivered to his garden pavilion in a bamboo canister. Historians still argue whether this was an early form of room service or just a fancy picnic. But the story sticks, and it nudges a subtle truth even the highest circles couldn't resist the ease of a good, portable meal. Your feet ache as you wander toward the West Market, clutching a tightly wrapped parcel that smells like sesame and smoke. A few feet away, a kid with a shaved head and mustard-stained tunic slurps noodles from a gourd bowl. He grins at you, his cheeks puffed like dumplings. You grin back. It's late, the stars are out, and no one's going to stop you from enjoying this meal on the go. And honestly, you'll need the fuel, because by the time the first rooster crows, half the city will be awake, hustling through paperwork, poetry, and politics, and they'll all want breakfast delivered. You chew, slowly savoring the tang of vinegar and ginger. It's strange, isn't it? How something as simple as a meal on the move could hint at such a vast and ancient machinery. But that's the Tang Dynasty for you. Complex, grand, and just a little bit hungry. By the time the eastern sky softens with morning haze, Chang'an is already alive with motion. You weave between carts, creaking under mounds of sesame cakes and baskets of boiled eggs, the streets still slick from last night's drizzle. This isn't just a city waking up, it's a capital combusting with appetite. Everywhere you turn, someone's selling, steaming, slicing, or shouting about something delicious. The Tang economy, you realize, might be run less on silver and more on scallion oil. You pause at a corner where 3 vendors shout over each other, each claiming to sell the crispiest pan-fried dumplings in the empire. One of them is probably right. Another one probably stole the recipe. The third, he's just yelling for fun. But that's the spirit of Tang street food, chaotic, competitive, and absolutely crucial to the city's pulse. These vendors aren't just feeding you, they're powering the empire's working class one snack at a time. Historians often focus on the glories of Tang poetry, the breathtaking murals, the trade along the Silk Road, but they rarely mention the food stall economy that made all of it possible. Because when you've got 10,000 scribes writing law codes, thousands of artisans shaping bronze, and an unknown number of extremely bored soldiers waiting for orders. They've all got one thing in common. They're hungry, constantly, and they're not dining in style. You duck under a striped canopy, the steam of mung bean porridge curling around your face. An old woman with sharp elbows pushes ahead of you. She wants 2 lotus seed buns for her grandson, who's guarding horses at the southern gate. A courier grabs his breakfast with one hand while tucking official scrolls into his robe with the other, and a tiny kid, maybe 6, holds a skewer of candied hawthorn with both hands like it's sacred treasure. It's a frenzy, but there's beauty in the bustle. The portable food scene blooms like the lotus in midsummer. Vendors adapt their offerings to fit in smaller spaces and be eaten with one hand. Egg cakes folded into quarters, fermented tofu pressed into waxy paper nuts, and fried flour ribbons tied off with twine. One vendor even pre-slices duck into bite-sized squares and sells it in what looks like a hollowed-out book. You're not sure if that's genius or slightly cursed, but you buy it anyway. The demands of daily life in a city of nearly 1 million people shape how food is made, sold, and most importantly, carried. There's no time to sit down at every meal. You might have to eat on horseback, on foot, or in a crowded public bathhouse if the day's gotten really weird. And so the food stall economy evolves. Containers get sturdier, handles appear. Meals get pre-wrapped in lotus leaves, sealed with rice paste, and stamped with ink symbols that tell you whether the dish is spicy vegetarian or, heaven forbid, has raisins. You slouch against a wooden post and nibble on a sesame roll, letting the energy of the morning wash over you. There's a carpenter wolfing down bamboo shoots before work, a weaver picking garlic chives from her teeth. Even the city guards are munching on boiled peanuts between shifts, their helmets fogging with every exhale. The food stall economy isn't just feeding people, it's organizing them, syncing their routines to the rhythm of rice and broth. But don't mistake this for mindless munching. In Chang'an, what you eat and how you eat it reflects your social standing, your profession, and your attitude toward life itself. Carrying your meal in a lacquered box, you're probably a poet. Slurping soup from a bamboo cylinder, scholar's apprentice, chewing on raw scallions and boiled millet from a cloth bundle. Soldier on leave, definitely. Every packaging choice is a social signal and sometimes a fashion statement. Some fringe scholars suggest the food economy even influenced Tang urban planning. There's an ongoing debate over whether certain market roads were widened not for military parades, but for food carts. One 8th century record describes a merchant road paved in grease and laughter, which, let's be honest, sounds like your average Saturday in Chang'an. The food stalls didn't just follow the crowd, sometimes they became the crowd. You follow a delivery boy who balances 5 wrapped boxes on a plank strapped across his shoulders. He's fast, alarmingly fast, dodging ox carts and sidestepping chickens like he's done this every day since birth. Each box is wrapped in a square of cloth printed with the character for warm. The steam leaking from the bundles tells you he's doing his job right. Somewhere down the street, a group of officials will pause their morning bickering to share noodles and gossip. And they'll never know who cooked it or how it arrived so fresh. By mid-morning, even the alleyways smell like breakfast. Pickled vegetables, chili oil, caramelized shallots. You drift through it all, wondering how such variety could exist in a single place at once. That's the magic of the Tang food stall economy. It's more than flavor. It's logistics. It's craftsmanship. It's community. And it's moving faster than your legs can carry you, so you stop. You sit on a worn step beside a cat that looks like it's judging you. You unwrap another roll, this one filled with mashed beans and something sweet you can't quite place. Maybe honey, maybe dates, maybe ancient joy. And you think for the first time this morning that you understand why this chaotic, oily, wonderful city needs takeout. Because if you paused to eat every time you were hungry in Chang'an, you'd never get anything else done. You lean back on the stone step, your half-eaten roll resting on your knee, and take in the street as it begins its transformation. Morning chaos is settling into the rhythm of daily labor. The shouting vendors have lowered their voices to a drone. Horses clop by more slowly now, their riders sipping broth from long-necked gourds. Even the cat beside you seems to yawn in approval. But while the surface of the city calms, the machinery of innovation quietly keeps grinding beneath it, especially when it comes to food delivery. It's here, in this breathing space between sunrise and high noon, that new ideas start to take root. You begin to notice it in subtle ways. Delivery runners now use slings made from hemp to carry boxes more steadily. Some have even reinforced their boxes with lacquered wood frames, resisting steam and crushing weight. And every few days someone shows up with a new twist, something folded differently, sealed tighter, stacked higher. You trail one of them now. A girl barely in her teens, balancing a bundle on each end of a bamboo pole across her shoulders. She's humming as she weaves through the thinning crowds, every step perfectly timed to keep the parcel steady. One glance at the folded leaf containers she carries tells you this isn't her first trip. One box is marked with a red wax seal, maybe spicy beef strips. Another is shaped like a lotus bloom, probably something vegetarian. She disappears into a side alley with the air of someone who knows exactly where she's going. Historians still argue whether these delivery networks were formalized guilds or loose family businesses. Tang records mention a few official courier systems for letters and imperial orders, but food delivery, that's in the realm of oral tradition of neighborhood rumor. What's clear, though, is that someone figured out how to turn a hot meal into a reliable, repeatable service. And they did it centuries before paper napkins even existed. At the center of it all were the boxes. Not the flappy cardboard ones we know today, but early ingenious designs crafted from what was available: wood, bamboo, folded palm leaves, even clay in some rural areas. These containers were designed with care, not only to hold the food, but to respect it. A rice dish with pickled vegetables might go in a curved bamboo shell, with little wedges separating the flavors. Soupy dishes came in hollowed-out gourd shells, the tops tied with twine. You hold one now, still warm, still fragrant, and feel a tiny burst of awe. There's something oddly elegant about these early food boxes. You begin to notice how they reflect Tang aesthetics: balanced, harmonious, functional, yet beautiful. Even the simplest carrier has some flair, a bit of color, a carved symbol, a tassel or dyed thread. This wasn't just about getting food from A to B. It was about dignity, about treating a portable meal as worthy of care. You pass a monk accepting lunch from a teenage boy with wind-chapped cheeks. The monk bows in thanks and unwraps a square of fabric to reveal steamed buns arranged like a flower. He eats slowly, reverently, offering the last bite to a passing bird. That's the thing, these takeout boxes weren't always rushed affairs. Sometimes they were meant to slow you down even as they moved with you. Sometimes they weren't about convenience. They were about connection. Meanwhile, in the artisan quarters just north of the market box, makers are pushing boundaries. You duck into a side alley and find a row of stalls selling containers of every imaginable style, stacked lacquer tiers for elite picnics, collapsible reed cases for traders on the go, and one absurd design shaped like a fish. You pick it up. It's hollow inside and smells faintly of cinnamon. A prank, maybe? Or maybe someone just really liked carp. Quirky as it sounds, this explosion of box design may have been driven not just by need, but by fashion. Tang culture was incredibly trend-driven. If a noble woman was spotted carrying her rice in a hexagonal lacquer case, you'd better believe 6 imitations would be for sale by the end of the week. Entire fads were built around container shape, handle placement, and wrapping techniques. Forget handbags. Tang takeout boxes were the original status symbol. And as always, the rich pushed the boundaries. Some records mention boxes inlaid with ivory or lined with silk to gently cradle the dumplings. That feels excessive. But hey, nothing says I'm above the rabble like dumpling upholstery. You imagine someone back then arguing with their box artisan the same way people today argue with baristas about foam consistency. Still, this innovation wasn't limited to the elite. One craftsman, you pass his fingers stained with lacquer, His breath full of sawdust shows you a collapsible wooden box that fits into a pocket. He flicks it open like a magic trick, and you instantly want one. Not just for the engineering, but for the feeling that you're holding a tiny portable universe. Inside you could carry lunch or a small miracle. As the sun rises higher, you find yourself thinking, all of this, the runners, the boxes, the constant smell of food in the air, it's part of something bigger. A movement, even if no one at the time called it that. The Tang Dynasty didn't just invent takeout boxes. It invented the idea that a good meal doesn't have to be tied to a table. And you're just lucky enough to be here to taste it. The afternoon sun presses down like a warm hand on your shoulders, and the city exhales another long breath. You wander north along a curved street where willow trees droop over rooftops, and incense wafts lazily from a nearby shrine. It's here, away from the market din, that the real genius of Tang Takeout starts to reveal itself, not just in how food is moved, but where it's going. Because surprisingly, takeout in this golden age isn't just about feeding merchants or overworked artisans. It's about serving scholars, monks, nobles, and a growing class of people who prefer not to cook at all. You round a corner and hear the low murmur of recitation. Through a window you glimpse a group of scholars, hunched over scrolls, scribbling in the fading light. Their hair is oiled, their robes ink-stained. But on the lacquered table beside them, takeout. Neatly packed rice and fish, wrapped in lotus leaves, accompanied by small parcels of pickled plum and roasted chestnut. One man eats with his left hand while copying Confucian verse with his right, barely looking down. Now that's multitasking. These scholars aren't just hungry, they're chronically busy. The Tang examination system is brutal, demanding years of study, memory work, and ink-stained dedication. Cooking, that's a distraction. So the food comes to them, and just like that, takeout becomes intellectual fuel. You can almost hear the university canteen doorbell ring, centuries ahead of its time. And it's not just the scholarly elite who benefit. You pass a quiet compound, once a merchant's villa, now converted into a halfway house for traveling monks. Inside boxes arrive like clockwork. Volunteers hand out simple but nourishing meals. To the weary, barley noodles in pepper broth, boiled cabbage with sesame, and sweet bean cakes that melt like guilt. Some of these monks walk thousands of li across mountains and deserts to reach the capital. They're greeted not with feasts but with folded kindness meals to restore body and spirit. This moment, this pairing of movement and meaning, is something the Tang seem to understand deeply. Food isn't just calories, it's comfort, ceremony, and communion. And if you can carry that in a box to someone who needs it, that's as close to magic as you get without summoning dragons. Historians still debate how institutionalized these food routes were. Some believe that monastic kitchens partnered with local cooks to ensure continuity. Others argue it was more spontaneous, a decentralized mesh of trust barter and neighborly habit. Either way, by the mid-Tang period, whole districts were unofficially known for their takeout options. One quarter near the east wall had so many delivery runners it earned the nickname Humming Alley. You guess it was the foot traffic, or maybe the sound of soup sloshing in gourd flasks. You follow a pair of couriers now, twins, judging by the synchronized steps and identical headbands. They're carrying long shoulder poles with tiered wooden stacks. Each box has a different burn mark etched into the side, a swirl, a square, a fish. Code for destination or contents. Probably both. You tail them through winding lanes until they vanish into a gatehouse where the guard greets them by name. Clearly these guys are regulars. And here's a fun twist. Sometimes these deliveries weren't just meals. They included poems. You pause beside an elderly calligrapher, recounting a time when takeout meals came bundled with handwritten verses, tiny blessings or political jokes tucked under the lid. A nod from the chef, a wink from the poet. Imagine getting your pork dumplings with a side of satire. There's even a fringe theory that some of these boxes were used for espionage. After all, what better way to sneak a coded message past guards than inside a roast duck wrap? A few historians laugh this off as romantic nonsense, but others aren't so sure. We lack proof, they say carefully, but the absence of evidence is not the evidence of absence, a phrase that sounds suspiciously like something a spy would say. You drift into a courtyard where a noble woman reclines on a shaded couch. Her servants unpack a stacked ceramic tower and place the dishes one by one in front of her gingered shrimp melon slices. A warm broth whose steam smells like home and ambition. She barely glances at the food, preoccupied with a tiny scroll held between two fingers. You guess the scroll arrived with the box. Love note, political update, or just a reminder to hydrate. That's the thing. Takeout in Tang times wasn't just sustenance. It was a delivery system for culture. Art, gossip, health advice, it could all hitch a ride with your midday meal. And the box itself was the stage. You lean against a carved pillar and feel the texture of history under your fingertips. The smell of fermented tofu mingles with floral perfume from the noblewoman's servants. A bamboo flute whistles somewhere behind you, and just for a moment, the whole city feels like one enormous banquet meals in motion flavors as varied as the streets, and everyone connected by these humble, brilliant little containers. You pull open a parcel tied with silk thread. Inside 2 sesame buns and a folded slip of paper. You read the first line aloud. It says, "Eat well, think better." Not bad advice. The sun dips behind the curved rooftops, casting the city in a sleepy amber hue. Lanterns flicker to life, dotting the streets like slow blinking fireflies. You're walking slower now, lulled by the rhythm of the city winding down. But food delivery, it turns out, doesn't keep office hours. In fact, this might be its busiest shift yet. The night economy in Tang has its own tempo, and takeout boxes are its heartbeat. You follow the glow of hanging signs and sizzling pans toward the entertainment quarter. It's loud here, louder than you'd expect in a city without amplifiers or neon. Laughter spills from painted doors. A group of musicians tunes their lutes under an archway, while servers dart between rooms like arrows loosed from bows. And with each pass, someone is delivering food. Bowls balanced, boxes clinking, hands steady. It's chaos, but it's choreographed. You duck into a tea house buzzing with energy. The air is thick with steam smoke and perfume. Courtesans sip plum wine under silk drapes, while poets argue about rhymes. In a shadowed corner, a merchant counts coins with one hand and pops dumplings into his mouth with the other, neatly packed in a six-tiered takeout tower, lacquered so black it reflects the lantern light like water. You could swear the top tier clicks shut with a smug little snick. This is where takeout stops being humble. In these high-end venues, your food doesn't just arrive warm, it arrives styled. Sliced duck fans out like calligraphy strokes. Seaweed is curled into tight spirals that resemble ink brush swirls. Even the dipping sauces are arranged in little porcelain petals. You half expect a server to hand you a tiny scroll explaining the symbolism of the garnish. Food as fashion show. Welcome to culinary theater. Still, not all nighttime takeout is so refined. Slip behind the curtain of this glamour district and you'll find a different rhythm: late-night meals for overworked dancers, bored guards, lonely servants. You pass a man crouched in an alley with a steaming clay bowl of rice and broth. He eats silently, the lamplight catching on the silver edge of a blade tucked into his belt. Delivery runner or bodyguard, hard to say, but either way the food hits the same. Historians still argue whether these night deliveries were officially sanctioned or under-the-table hustles. Tang laws were strict about curfews and crowd control, yet records show that food vendors were often allowed to operate well into the night, especially in elite zones. One theory suggests that wealthy patrons paid quiet taxes to keep the deliveries flowing. Another claims the couriers were granted temple protection and simply moved in monks' robes. The truth, as always, probably both and neither. You sneak down a narrow alley where shadowy figures move with purpose. One woman hauls a chest strapped to her back, the lid creaking with every step. She pauses to hand off a wrapped parcel through a low window, no words exchanged. The recipient, judging by the scent, just scored himself a late-night helping of sesame-stuffed buns. you silently applaud. In the quieter quarters evening, Takeout takes on a more intimate tone. A young couple shares lotus-wrapped fish on their balcony, the girl feeding the boy bite by bite between jokes. On another rooftop, an old man pours tea over cold rice to warm it again. His wrinkled hands steady his expression, thoughtful. The box beside him is simple wooden, cracked on one side, but it has history. You can feel it. And maybe that's the real wonder of Tang Takeout. It's not just what the box holds, it's who it touches. Lovers, laborers, nobles, scholars, performers, monks, everyone eats, everyone shares. Everyone at some point in this city has cracked open a container and felt grateful for the meal inside. You pass by a watchman at the gate of a courtyard theater. He waves down a boy carrying a bundle tied with silk ribbon. The exchange is quick, efficient. The box disappears into the guard's lap like a magic trick. He doesn't open it immediately, just rests his hand on top as if to say, "I made it through another day." Nearby, a poet, clearly drunk, begins reciting a verse about dumplings and destiny. His friends laugh, raising their chopsticks in mock salute. You hear the clink of ceramic, the rustle of paper wrapping, and feel a strange sense of comfort. Not because the night is ending, but because the city is still feeding itself, still connecting through the ancient joy of a good meal shared even when it's delivered across thresholds instead of across tables. You pause under a silk lantern as the sky deepens into navy. Somewhere nearby, a wooden box clicks shut. Footsteps fade into the night, and the city, though quieting, is far from asleep. You know you're still dreaming, walking now through early dawn mist as the city resets. The stones under your feet are cool and damp, and the Tang capital yawns to life in shades of blue. The air is sharper, brisker, and for a moment you think you're alone. But you aren't. Around you, morning delivery runners are already moving swift and practiced like shadows with errands. And in their arms, boxes stacked, strapped, slung, and balanced with the kind of finesse you normally reserve for street magicians or professional jugglers. Here's something you didn't expect. Breakfast takeout is a whole different art form. Nighttime meals may have style, but mornings demand function. Rice porridge still hot enough to fog a lacquer lid. Tea eggs wrapped in soft cloth to keep from cracking. Fried dough sticks youtiao delivered in waxed paper tucked snugly between wooden panels. If dinner is the showstopper, breakfast is the heartbeat. You follow a girl no older than 12 balancing a tray nearly as wide as her wingspan. She's delivering to a row of calligraphy apprentices, boys her age or younger, who eat quickly before the master's stick raps against their knuckles. Their breakfasts arrive just in time. Pickled radish hot soy milk and one lonely steamed bun each. A full meal, no frills. The girl bows, collects her coins, and vanishes back into the morning haze. And then there's the postal factor. Historians still debate whether Tang food couriers sometimes doubled as messengers. One theory gaining fringe popularity suggests that early morning runners would deliver news scrolls alongside meals, especially to officials or scholars. The timing matched up perfectly, a warm breakfast and an imperial bulletin hand-delivered before sunrise, efficient but also risky. Another theory says they wore color-coded sashes to signify what kind of deliveries they carried, food letters or both. But like most good conspiracies, it's tantalizing and unverifiable. You wind through an alleyway now lined with closed shop stalls and shuttered tea houses, but behind the paper screens, kitchens are awake. The scent of garlic and ginger wafts from one corner, fish stock from another. A cook hums as he spoons rice into a clay box, then seals it with a cork lid and hot wax. His fingers move like a musician's. Box after box, package after package, no two the same. No two they. Down the road a bakery loads stacked wooden boxes into a cart. The smell of sweet bean buns lingers on the breeze. One runner, face flushed with exertion, pulls a curved knife from her boot and uses it to quickly slice a thick cord of twine that had tangled her parcels. She ties a new knot, slings the stack across her shoulders, and sets off without missing a beat. Efficiency like that makes you wonder how many tangles she's sliced through before breakfast. Probably more than you've faced all week. Not all deliveries, though, are for people on the move. Some are sent as offerings to temples, to shrines, even to ancestors. You pass a small household altar, where an elderly woman sets down a takeout box wrapped in red silk. Inside, 4 dumplings, 2 coins, and a hand-painted note. You aren't sure if she's feeding the dead or just missing someone, but the gesture still makes your chest go a little tight. Meanwhile, deeper in the city, another kind of delivery unfolds. You reach the kitchens of a government building, low gray tiles, stern windows, no nonsense. But inside it smells like heaven pork, simmered in 5 spice sautéed greens, sticky rice. A young aide takes a stack of boxes from a boy wearing a government-issued badge. The exchange is fast, like muscle memory. One official barely looks up from his scroll as he lifts the lid on a steaming rice bowl, digs in with chopsticks, and continues writing in the same fluid stroke. It's politics with a side of soy sauce. You pass by a lonely garden where a former soldier sits feeding birds. He opens a tiny clay box, reveals 2 pieces of dried fruit, and tosses them to the sparrows clustered on the railing. "Breakfast for the brave," he says with a half-smile. Whether he means himself or the birds, you can't quite tell. Another cook nearby talks to no one in particular as he wraps bundles in waxed cloth. "We used to just hand them over raw," he mutters. "Now everyone wants things sealed, timed, labeled." You nod, even though he's not talking to you. Because that's the thing, Takeout, like everything else in Tang life, has started to evolve. The packaging is smarter. The routes are faster. The expectations are rising. And as the sun finally crests the walls of Chang'an, you realize something kind of beautiful. This isn't just a convenience. It's a rhythm, a language, a dance passed down hand to hand, box to box, meal to meal, from emperors to errand girls, from shrines to scholars, from morning hush to market chaos, food delivered, morning ripples into midday, and the city pulses with a fresh energy. Vendors shouting, horses clattering, and the ever-present hum of wheels turning on cobblestones. You're now stepping into the busiest hours for food delivery. It's when the takeaway box isn't just a convenience, but a necessity. For merchants juggling ledgers, laborers tight on breaks, and poets chasing inspiration between sips of tea, the takeout box is a lifeline. You watch a man in a scholar's robe balance a rectangular wooden box on his knee while jotting notes in a scroll. His lunch, tender slices of roasted duck, layered over fragrant rice garnished with pickled vegetables pressed neatly in leaf wrappings. You might think eating on the go would be messy, but the Tang box is an ancient masterpiece of compartmentalization. Food stays separated, flavors preserved, no unexpected soup explosions. That invention alone probably saved 1,000 robes from certain disaster. This midday rush also exposes some of the social contrasts woven into Tang society. The wealthy enjoy lacquered boxes with carved patterns, some even inlaid with mother of pearl, while common folk make do with simple bamboo or wooden cases. Still, the basic design stays the same: portability, freshness, and a satisfying meal. Even in those simpler boxes, a surprising amount of care goes into wrapping rice cakes or steaming buns. It's a silent nod to the importance of food in everyday life. Historians still argue whether the spread of takeout boxes was driven more by social changes or economic necessity. Some scholars believe that urbanization and the explosion of city life forced people into eating outside the home more frequently, while others argue that culinary culture itself, especially the rise of street food vendors, pushed the invention forward. The reality, as usual, is tangled like a bowl of noodles. Nearby, you spot a food vendor with a portable stove on a cart stirring a thick stew in a giant iron pot. The smell of spices cuts through the city air. He expertly packs the stew into deep clay pots and stacks them inside a tall wooden crate. A messenger rushes by, collects a pot, and disappears down an alley. That pot is going somewhere important, maybe an official's office or a construction site where hungry workers need a quick meal. One quirky detail you might not expect: some takeaway containers had tiny built-in compartments for chopstick rests. This is the kind of detail that makes you realize the Tang people cared not just about utility, but also etiquette and presentation. Food delivery wasn't just about eating, it was about maintaining dignity even when you were on the move. A chopstick holder might seem trivial, but in a culture where manners mattered, it was a game changer. As you weave through the market, you overhear a debate between two vendors arguing about the best materials for takeout boxes. Bamboo, they say, is lightweight and eco-friendly, but prone to splintering. Wood is sturdy but heavy, and lacquerware. Beautiful but expensive, mostly reserved for nobility. Each material shapes the meal experience differently, influencing how the food tastes, feels, and travels. Meanwhile, children dart through the crowds, clutching their own miniature takeout boxes filled with snacks like sesame balls and sticky rice dumplings. These bite-sized delights are proof that the takeaway box wasn't just for grown-ups rushing through their day. It was a family affair. Even the youngest in the city had a taste of this evolving food culture. You pause at a pavilion where a group of musicians takes a break. Their lunch arrives in long, slender boxes, stacked like dominoes. They eat together, sharing small bites and stories. One fiddler jokes about the box being his portable stage where every meal is a performance. The group laughs, passing around steamed buns and tea wrapped in bamboo leaves. In this lively scene, you glimpse the versatility of the takeout box. It fits in the hands of a scholar, a street vendor, a musician, and a merchant alike. It's more than a container. It's a symbol of a dynamic, connected city that never really stops moving. You're almost tempted to reach for a box yourself, but instead you keep walking, savoring the sights, sounds, and smells of Tang as it unfolds around you. Food is everywhere, delivered, shared, and celebrated. And you can't help but marvel at how this simple invention quietly changed the way the city lived. As afternoon fades into evening, the city takes on a different kind of rhythm. The sun's harsh glare softens and shadows stretch long across the stone streets. You notice that food delivery doesn't slow down, it shifts gears. Dinner orders fly in from all corners, and the takeaway box becomes a carrier of comfort after a long day. It's no longer just fuel, it's a welcome ritual. You trail a courier weaving deftly through traffic, her arms laden with lacquered boxes, sealed tight with silk cords. Inside, the meals are diverse. A fragrant stew of beef and daikon lotus root slices pickled in vinegar and sticky rice balls dusted with sesame seeds. The boxes aren't just practical, they're art, each one a miniature treasure chest. Handling them feels like cradling a secret. One of the stranger tangents in this story, some Tang nobles reportedly used decorated takeout boxes as gifts or tokens in courtship rituals. A beautifully crafted box filled with rare delicacies could express interest, respect, or even subtle political messages. Imagine receiving your lunch and a silent, "Let's talk," wrapped inside. Historians still argue about how widespread this practice was, but the idea adds an intriguing flavor to the tale. You come across a street lined with musicians and performers, all hungry after hours of entertaining. They pass around simple wooden boxes with rice and preserved vegetables, sharing bites and stories. A pipa player cracks a joke about how their box might be the only thing stopping them from turning into hangry monsters. Laughter bubbles up, mixing with the clink of teacups. Meanwhile, kitchens behind closed doors bustle with activity. Cooks test new recipes, experimenting with spices, textures, and packaging techniques. Some are trying to keep food warmer longer inside the boxes, a challenge without modern insulation. Others focus on sturdier materials to prevent spills during long deliveries. You realize this is a culture obsessed not just with flavor but with innovation. A local legend adds a quirky twist. A famous Tang chef supposedly designed a special box that doubled as a musical instrument, producing soft tones when shaken, part meal, part serenade. While it sounds like a stretch, it speaks to the era's playful creativity. Whether true or folklore, it reminds you that food and culture were inseparable. You pause near a riverbank where workers gather to eat their takeout meals. They sit on wooden planks, dipping their chopsticks into steaming boxes and chatting about the day's toil. Their lunch boxes may lack luxury, but the warmth of the food brings a moment of relief. Here, the takeaway box becomes a unifier, bridging social divides with something as basic and profound as shared nourishment. As the sky deepens into twilight, lanterns light up the streets. You spot a merchant handing a lacquer box to a weary traveler. Inside is a carefully packed meal designed for the journey ahead, compact filling and easily carried. The traveler bows gratefully, clutching the box like a talisman for safe passage. In the distance you hear the faint clang of the city gates closing for the night. But inside, the takeout culture buzzes on. Night markets awaken, and with them another round of food delivery begins. The box that started its journey in the morning now completes its circle, bringing sustenance and solace to the city's restless souls. You realize that this invention, so simple and unassuming, has become a thread woven tightly into the city's fabric. It's a silent partner in the daily dance of life, making sure that no one goes hungry no matter how busy or far they are. And as the evening cools, you feel a little closer to the heartbeat of Tang, one takeout box at a time. Night deepens, and Chang'an takes on a quieter, more mysterious tone. Street lamps flicker, casting warm circles of light on the worn cobblestones. The market stalls have folded up, but the scent of food lingers like a ghost in the air. This is when the city's nocturnal rhythm begins, the twilight hours, where the takeaway box transforms yet again, catering to travelers, night workers, and dreamers who need a meal on the move. You follow a lone courier, his breath misting in the cool night air as he navigates the twisting alleys. His load is lighter now, but every box is packed with care. Steaming noodles with slices of spiced pork tofu cubes simmered in a rich broth, and lotus seeds glazed in honey. The boxes are smaller at night, meant to be quick and satisfying, fueling the late shift rather than a full feast. One quirky fact you might not expect: some late-night food vendors in Tang were rumored to prepare special dream meals infused with calming herbs intended to soothe restless sleepers or induce pleasant dreams. While it sounds more like folklore than fact, it highlights the culture's attention to the relationship between food and well-being. Historians still debate how widespread these practices were, but the stories add a poetic touch to the takeaway tradition. You pause at a tea house that's still open, where a few patrons linger, sipping jasmine tea and nibbling on steamed buns. The server delivers takeaway boxes with a quiet efficiency, tucking in handwritten notes alongside the food. These notes, often poems or friendly messages, make you think of the takeaway box as a carrier not just of sustenance but of connection. As you move through the dim streets, you encounter night workers, guards, scribes, and cleaners who welcome the arrival of their evening meals. Their boxes are rugged, designed to withstand the rough handling of night shifts. The food inside is hearty, filling enough to keep exhaustion at bay. The takeaway box is their companion, a small comfort amid the city's shadows. A surprising detail: some couriers used lanterns shaped like mythical creatures to carry their food, lighting the path and warding off bad luck. Whether these lanterns were purely decorative or had deeper superstitions attached is a subject still discussed by scholars. You imagine the soft glow casting dancing shadows on the walls, guiding both the food and its bearer safely home. You stop near a riverbank where fishermen unwrap their takeaway meals under the starlight. They share rice and pickled vegetables, their voices low and calm. The boxes here are simpler, made of sturdy bamboo designed to keep food fresh in the cool night air. The camaraderie feels tangible, bound together by shared meals in the dark. Further on, a scholar burns incense beside his takeout box, murmuring prayers for health and success. The box is lacquered, adorned with delicate paintings of cranes and pine trees. It's more than a meal container. It's a talisman carrying hopes and intentions alongside the food. You notice a group of street performers packing up their boxes filled with leftovers meant for the less fortunate. It's a reminder that the takeaway box also plays a role in charity and community. Food isn't just exchanged for money, it's shared, gifted, and sometimes given without expectation. As the night winds down, you find yourself reflecting on the journey of this simple invention, from dawn's first light to the hush of midnight. The takeout box carries not just meals, but stories, dreams, and the pulse of a city that never quite sleeps. Dawn creeps back over the city walls, and you find yourself circling back to the bustling heart of Chang'an, where the takeaway box's journey begins anew. It's early, yet already the sounds of merchants preparing their goods fill the air. You're drawn to a small workshop tucked between the larger market stalls, where artisans craft these ingenious boxes by hand. Here the transformation from raw bamboo and wood into a functional piece of art happens. Skilled hands shave thin strips of bamboo, weaving them carefully, while others carve intricate patterns into lacquered surfaces. This craftsmanship is a forgotten dance between utility and beauty, every box, both a container and a statement. One fringe tidbit that might surprise you. Some craftsmen used a secret blend of tree resins and oils to waterproof the boxes, a technique closely guarded and passed down only through generations. This natural seal kept food fresh longer and prevented leakage, a crucial innovation in a time without plastic or metal containers. Historians still debate the exact composition of these coatings, with some suggesting early forms of lacquer were part of the mix. You watch as an apprentice tests a finished box by filling it with hot rice and letting it sit. The box holds the heat evenly, and the aroma seeps gently through the lid's delicate vent holes. It's an artful balance, too tight, and condensation ruins the meal. Too loose, and the food cools too fast. The takeaway box is a product of careful experimentation and a deep understanding of materials. Nearby, a vendor discusses the challenges of transporting food across the sprawling city. Jostling carts and crowded streets mean the box must be durable yet lightweight. Innovations like collapsible handles and tiered compartments emerged to meet these challenges. You might laugh imagining a 9th century foldable lunchbox, but that's precisely the kind of clever thinking that defined Tang innovation. The workshop buzzes with stories. One old master claims to have crafted a box so finely balanced it could be carried on a single finger without spilling a drop. Whether that's bragging or fact, you can't help but admire the pride these artisans take in their work. Their creations are woven into the city's fabric, silently supporting the rhythms of daily life. In a nearby alley, a young woman sells food wrapped in simple paper, claiming that the humble wrapping was the original Takeout box. It's a reminder that before bamboo and lacquer, people improvised with what was at hand. The evolution of the takeaway container reflects not just innovation, but adaptability. You pass a scholar scribbling notes on the history of these boxes, debating whether the concept originated in southern China or was imported along the Silk Road. The scholarly dispute is lively and ongoing. Such debates enrich your understanding that history is never static, always in motion, just like the city itself. Meanwhile, the aroma of fresh tea blends with the scent of the newly crafted boxes. It's a sensory reminder that the takeaway box was part of a larger cultural ecosystem, where food, drink art, and commerce intersected seamlessly. This morning workshop isn't just about making containers. It's about crafting experiences. You take a moment to appreciate the delicate balance between tradition and necessity. The takeaway box is born from both an answer to the demands of a growing city and a reflection of the Tang Dynasty's sophisticated artistry. As you leave the workshop behind, you carry with you a deeper appreciation for the humble container that shaped so much more than just lunch. As the sun climbs higher, the city awakens fully, and you find yourself wandering toward the lively street food vendors who rely on these takeaway boxes daily. The vendors' voices create a chorus of energy calls for customers, sizzling sounds from woks and the rhythmic chopping of knives. Each vendor's stall is a small world where flavors mix and mingle, and the takeaway box plays a starring role. You watch as a vendor expertly fills a box with steaming dumplings, arranging them like tiny jewels. The boxes aren't just containers here, they're packaging that preserves the food's integrity and aroma during its journey to hungry customers. You can almost smell the fragrant soy sauce and garlic mingling with the steam. Here's a quirky fact. Some vendors added lucky charms inside their boxes, small paper talismans or coins meant to bring good fortune to the eater. Whether it's superstition or marketing, it added an extra layer of meaning to an already delightful meal. Historians still argue whether these charms were widespread or limited to certain regions or social classes. You notice that the boxes come in all shapes and sizes, from single serving portions to larger multi-compartment sets designed for families or groups. This variety shows a sophisticated understanding of customer needs and meal contexts. No one-size-fits-all solution here. Each meal's box is tailored to its purpose. You follow a courier as she navigates through a bustling marketplace, her arms balanced with trays of these precious boxes. The risk of spills or damage is ever present, but the craftsmanship ensures the food arrives intact. The courier's deft movements suggest this is a skill learned over years, almost a dance on the crowded streets. At a quieter corner, a tea master prepares boxed tea sets for delivery, complete with small cups and fragrant leaves. The takeaway box in this case is a vessel for ceremony, blending practicality with elegance. It's a reminder that the box's function extended beyond food, touching many aspects of daily life. A playful rumor floats around the market that a famous poet once wrote verses inspired by the shape and symbolism of the takeaway box. Whether fact or fancy, it highlights how this simple object sparked creativity and conversation in Tang society. You pause to watch a family gathered under a tree sharing meals from a set of stacked boxes. Each person takes turns opening compartments, revealing an array of dishes, meat, vegetables, rice, and pickles, all neatly separated. It's a communal experience made possible by the design and convenience of the takeaway box. Nearby, you overhear a conversation about the environmental impact of these boxes. Some worry that discarded boxes cluttered streets and waterways, a problem not unlike today's packaging waste. This sparks debates among merchants and officials, showing that sustainability concerns have ancient roots. The vendors themselves adapt, experimenting with biodegradable materials and encouraging customers to return boxes for reuse. This early form of recycling suggests an impressive ecological awareness within the bustling trade. As the market hums with life, you recognize the takeaway box, not just as a container, but as a cultural symbol, one that connects people, traditions, and innovations across time and space. It carries more than food. It carries stories, memories, and the vibrant pulse of a thriving city. As the midday sun reaches its peak, the city streets buzz with the hurried footsteps of merchants, officials, and scholars, all dependent on quick, nourishing meals delivered in the trusty takeaway box. You weave through the crowd, your senses alive with the mingled scents of sizzling oil, fragrant herbs, and freshly steamed buns. This is the city's pulse, and the takeaway box is its quiet heartbeat. One intriguing detail emerges: some wealthy families commissioned takeaway boxes with secret compartments to hide precious items, jewels, letters, or even poisons. This dual purpose turns the simple container into a vessel of intrigue and espionage. Historians still argue whether such use was common or the stuff of spy novels. You observe a group of couriers exchanging stories during a rare break. They joke about the weirdest things they've found hidden inside boxes once. A box held a whole live chicken that had escaped confinement, causing quite a commotion. The mix of humor and danger reminds you that the takeaway box could be as unpredictable as the city itself. You wander toward a governmental complex where officials receive their meals in heavily lacquered boxes, often embossed with symbols denoting rank and status. These boxes not only contained food, but also conveyed messages about social hierarchy and political power, a silent language etched in wood and paint. Nearby, a street artist sketches the bustling scene, inspired by the choreography of couriers and the artistry of the boxes themselves. The takeaway box here becomes muse and subject, its form and function immortalized in ink and brush. Such creativity highlights the cultural impact of an object you might otherwise overlook. A curious fact: some takeaway boxes included small compartments for condiments, soy sauce, chili paste, vinegar, allowing diners to customize flavors on the go. This innovation shows a surprising sophistication in how people experienced food outside traditional dining settings. You come across a traveling merchant who tells tales of distant lands where different materials and designs are used for food containers. He speaks of leather pouches and clay pots, but praises the bamboo and lacquer boxes of Shangan for their balance of durability and beauty. His stories hint at the exchange of ideas along trade routes that shaped the takeaway box's evolution. The afternoon wanes, and you notice a group of students huddled together, sharing meals from stacked boxes while discussing poetry and philosophy. Their takeaway boxes, though simple, are symbols of camaraderie and learning, fueling not just bodies but minds. At a nearby shrine, a priest offers takeaway meals to pilgrims, wrapped carefully in paper and placed inside lightweight boxes for easy transport. The boxes serve as both nourishment and a blessing, linking the physical act of eating to spiritual journeys. You reflect on how the takeaway box transcends its practical role, becoming woven into rituals, relationships, and stories across Chang'an. This humble invention quietly shapes daily life, culture, and connection in ways both obvious and subtle. As the afternoon light softens, you find yourself wandering toward the quieter residential quarters where takeaway boxes make their way into family homes and humble apartments. The atmosphere here feels intimate, less bustle, more familiarity. It's in these moments that you glimpse how the takeaway box becomes a bridge between public life and private comfort. You watch as a mother unwraps a lacquered box revealing steaming rice, braised pork, and pickled vegetables. The aroma fills the small room, wrapping around her children like a warm blanket. It's a simple meal, but one made extraordinary by the care of the takeaway box, preserving freshness and flavor until the moment it's opened. A surprising tidbit emerges. Some families kept sets of takeaway boxes specifically for festive occasions, decorated with symbols of longevity and prosperity. These special boxes weren't just functional, they were heirlooms passed down and treasured through generations. Historians still debate how common such traditions were outside elite households. You notice a young couple sharing a meal from a stacked box on their balcony, the cityscape sprawling beneath them. Their laughter and conversation feel like a private world held within the folds of the takeaway box's compartments. The box here acts as a container not only of food, but of shared moments. Across the courtyard, an elderly man carefully cleans and repairs a worn bamboo box. His hands steady despite age. His reverence for the box speaks volumes. This isn't just a container, but a keeper of memories, worn edges telling stories of countless meals and fleeting days. Nearby, a street vendor sells small sweets and snacks packaged in tiny takeaway boxes, perfect for sharing. You catch a glimpse of a carved wooden box believed to bring good luck to travelers and merchants. The intertwining of superstition and practicality adds depth to the story of these containers. You overhear a conversation about the environmental impact of takeaway packaging. Even then, some lamented the waste generated by discarded boxes and sought ways to reuse or recycle materials. It's a reminder that sustainability concerns are far from modern inventions. In a nearby garden, a scholar practices calligraphy beside a box filled with tea and snacks. The act of eating and writing harmonizing in quiet ritual. The takeaway box becomes a symbol of cultured leisure, a silent partner in moments of reflection and artistry. You glimpse children eagerly opening boxes filled with colorful treats during festivals. The excitement of discovery mirroring the layered surprises within the container itself. The box is a treasure chest, a bearer of delight beyond mere nourishment. As twilight falls, you walk past a communal dining area where neighbors share meals straight from takeaway boxes, breaking bread and barriers alike. The boxes facilitate connection, encouraging generosity and community spirit. You think back to earlier sections, how the takeaway box has journeyed from workshops to markets, from night streets to family tables. It's a quiet witness to the rhythms of life, a vessel carrying more than food, carrying human stories, emotions, and traditions in its compartments. Night unfurls gently over the rooftops of Chang'an, and you find yourself following the lantern-lit path toward the entertainment quarters where music, theater, and feasting intermingle under the Tang Dynasty's velvet sky. The takeaway box, surprisingly, still makes its appearance here, no less elegant or necessary than in the marketplaces and homes. You enter a tea house where performers prepare behind bamboo screens, their laughter low and lilting. A tray of takeaway boxes arrives, each one tied with a ribbon of silk containing light meals to sustain the artists through their evening routines. The boxes are small, discreet, and designed for quiet nibbling between acts, proof that even in the delicate world of performance practicality reigns. A curious anecdote floats your way. One famed courtesan was said to have crafted poetry inspired by the layered elegance of takeaway compartments, using food as metaphor. Her verses likened tender dumplings to whispered secrets and soy-drizzled noodles to tangled affairs. Historians still argue whether her work was satire, romantic lament, or both. You slip into a back room where music students snack from shared boxes while practicing flute and pipa. Each bite is punctuated by off-key notes, bursts of laughter, and the clink of chopsticks. The takeaway box becomes part of their creative process, a quiet companion to trial and error. Out in the theater hall, attendees sip plum wine and enjoy boxed desserts before the curtain rises. These aren't ordinary boxes. They're ornate, engraved with characters for joy and luck, often gifted as mementos of the evening. You catch sight of one elderly patron who opens her box slowly, as though each compartment holds a different memory from decades past. A fringe detail draws your attention. Certain takeaway boxes from the elite brocade houses had scented linings, floral citrus or sandalwood, to enhance the experience of unwrapping a meal. Not just a feast for the tongue, but for the nose and fingers, too. It's indulgence as architecture. Down a narrow alley, you follow a discreet courier delivering midnight meals to scholars in the city's western tower. Their takeaway boxes, designed to minimize smell and noise, are filled with late-night comfort food, pickled radish rice porridge, tea-soaked eggs. The boxes enable their focus, fueling long hours of study. You come upon a small gambling den where fortune seekers unwrap boxes of greasy fried snacks between tense dice rolls. The boxes here are haphazard and oil-stained, a far cry from the lacquered ones of the theater, but still they serve the same faithful purpose. Even vice, it seems, has an appetite. As the moon climbs, you watch a painter outside his studio brushing broad strokes onto silk while picking at a chilled meal from a compartmentalized box. One layer holds sliced lotus root, another red bean sweets. The meal feels incidental, just enough sustenance to sustain the artist's mind through the midnight hours. You eavesdrop on two philosophers debating over a shared box of noodles, arguing whether human nature is fundamentally good or inherently flawed. The box lies between them like an edible peace treaty, its contents negotiated with equal passion. And somewhere above it all, on a rooftop cloaked in silence, a solitary poet eats from a box in the dark, composing verses to a lover who never returned. The box again is a companion to longing, silent, sturdy, always there. The moonlight glints softly off the wet cobblestones as you make your way toward the outskirts of Chang'an, where the city breathes a little easier and the pace slows like a deep exhale. Even here, far from palace walls and merchant stalls, the takeaway box holds its own, nestled in the hands of travelers, farmers, and wandering monks. You find a small roadside inn nestled between two willow trees, its door hanging slightly ajar. Inside, a group of weary travelers are unwrapping takeaway boxes handed to them upon arrival. Their faces relax as the warmth and scent rise, a medley of duck, rice, scallions, and ginger. It's not just a meal. It's welcome comfort and rest. A wandering monk beside the hearth cradles a small wooden box carved with scripture. Each of its compartments holds simple vegetarian fare, arranged with the kind of care that speaks to mindfulness. He eats slowly, gratefully, each bite a meditation. There's a belief among some circles that the arrangement of food in a box mirrors the alignment of stars, a symbolic harmony. Historians still argue whether this was truly practiced or poetic hindsight. Outside, a farmer opens a familiar bamboo box while watching over his grazing oxen. His box contains leftovers from the temple kitchen, sweet potatoes, pickled mustard greens, and steamed buns. He taps the lid gently afterward, a superstition meant to thank the spirits for the sustenance. Superstitions and snacks, hand in hand. Nearby, two messengers on horseback share a box during a brief pause in their long ride. One tells the other that in the south boxes are often layered in fives rather than threes, a local quirk attributed to lucky numbers and family customs. They swap food and stories, their bond deepened over sesame cakes and fish floss. You wander down a dirt road and come across a family unpacking boxes under the stars. They're on pilgrimage, and the father explains that each box was prepared by a different relative meant to carry blessings from home. One box has a red silk lining, another contains a sprig of dried chrysanthemum tucked beside the rice. Food as benediction. In a quiet village not far from the river, takeaway boxes are passed out to performers of a harvest dance. Laughter and song echo into the night, punctuated by the sound of lids being pried open. You spot a young boy with a paintbrush decorating discarded box lids with dragons and tigers, creating toys from leftovers. Even refuse is repurposed. Further down the riverbank, a group of fisher folk warm their hands by a fire, each cradling a takeaway box, like a small chest of treasures. Theirs are filled with grilled eel, sticky rice, and chili paste, and they joke that the boxes are better company than most people. It's the kind of humor that only makes sense when you've been at sea. You hear of a traveling doctor who delivers medicine and meals in custom takeaway boxes, each compartment serving a different healing purpose. Ginger broth for warmth, pickled garlic for immunity, sticky rice to settle the stomach. Her patients speak of her with reverence, the boxes as talismans of hope. As the night deepens, you climb a small hill and sit beside a man playing a bamboo flute. His takeaway box lies open next to him, holding nothing but sliced fruit and a half-eaten mooncake. He tells you he plays for those who never made it home to open their boxes. His music is a lullaby for the lost. Even far from the city's core, the takeaway box has found its place, quiet, enduring, essential. It isn't just a mark of civilization. It's a map of humanity following people wherever they go, feeding them in silence, leaving behind memories in lacquer, bamboo, and string. Dawn returns to Chang'an with a hazy yawn brushing the rooftops in pale gold. You retrace your steps through the city, now pulsing again with activity, but this time your attention shifts to how takeaway boxes influence not just lives, but livelihoods. They aren't just tools, they're economies in miniature rippling through workshops, guilds, and kitchens. You enter a district known for its craftsmanship, where box makers shape their living with chisel and steam. The air smells like wood shavings and rice glue. Here, entire families are involved in the process. Grandparents weaving bamboo strips, parents sanding edges, and children affixing hinges. Their rhythm is as methodical as a tea ceremony. In one shop, you observe a craftswoman who insists that no two boxes should look exactly alike. She adds subtle differences. One box might have a lotus motif, another a hidden coin slot. She calls them her signature surprises. Some collectors in modern times still claim to own one of her originals, though historians continue to debate the authenticity of these claims. You overhear talk of counterfeit boxes flooding the markets, lower quality mass-produced and lacking the careful sealing that keeps food fresh. It's a reminder that wherever there's demand, shortcuts sneak in. Guilds have begun stamping approved boxes with a hot wax seal, ensuring the buyer knows it's the real deal. Not far away, a group of delivery runners gather at sunrise, stretching and laughing. Each wears a sash marked with the emblem of the Takeaway Guild. These runners, often teenagers, memorize entire route shortcuts and customer quirks. They pride themselves on discretion, punctuality and knowing whether a client prefers dumplings warm or blistering hot. You spot a teenage girl tucking extra napkins into a delivery box with a practiced flick. Her older brother, already on his fifth run of the morning, jokes that she'll be a senior courier before summer. It's more than a side gig. It's their path out of poverty, one box at a time. An innkeeper on the edge of the square reveals her business model. She makes more from takeaway orders than in-house dining. With limited seating and high demand, her boxed meals are her secret weapon. Each dish is portioned precisely, labeled, and tied with red twine. She calls it her kitchen ballet. You peek behind the market stalls to find a workshop innovating new box designs, stackables with rotating lids, collapsible models, even fire-resistant containers for long treks. It's like watching a medieval Silicon Valley. One inventor proudly demonstrates a steam release hole that lets soup breathe without spilling. A bystander mutters, "About time." A fringe rumor floats through the alley. Someone in Luoyang is developing takeaway boxes with inlaid charms to ward off bad luck. Tiny talismans carved into the bottom, hidden beneath the rice. Superstition or strategy? Historians still argue whether this practice truly took hold or fizzled out like warm tea in the sun. You visit a temple kitchen where monks pack hundreds of humble meals each morning into recycled boxes. Their mantra, "Waste nothing, feed many." The boxes are returned daily, washed, dried in sunlight, and used again. One monk jokes, "This box has fed more mouths than a banquet table." Probably true. Toward the riverbank, a widow sells budget boxes to construction crews, each wrapped in cloth and filled with hearty stews and sticky buns. Her sons help prepare them before sunrise. For her, the boxes are not just a living, they're a tribute to her late husband who once delivered food with a cart of his own. It hits you then slowly. The takeaway box isn't just a side character in history. It's a quiet economic engine, a livelihood, a social safety net in bamboo and twine, as much a part of the city's heartbeat as the bells that ring each dawn. The scent of grilled scallions follows you as you wind through one of Chang'an's busiest thoroughfares. It's market day, and the city's culinary heart beats at full tempo. But this time your eye isn't on the vendors or the boxes they sell, it's on the diners. The takeaway box has evolved into something more than a vessel. It's become a marker of status, taste, and even rebellion. You spot a well-dressed young man perched on a shaded bench, delicately opening a lacquered box with intricate phoenix carvings. Inside bite-sized braised pork belly, arranged like a mosaic. He unwraps a napkin embroidered with his family crest and eats with golden chopsticks. Some takeaway boxes aren't just meals, they're flexes. Beside him, a scholar unfurls his scroll and absent-mindedly picks at a box of cold noodles with sesame. He doesn't look up, too absorbed in his notes. Yet the box is no less exquisite, its compartments shaped like miniature scrolls themselves. There's a certain quiet prestige in appearing indifferent to quality. Further along, a group of teenagers crowd around a vendor selling novelty boxes shaped like turtles. Each contains an odd mix of pickled fruits and egg tarts. These are the trendsetters, the ones chasing the next viral bite. And yes, you think even in the Tang Dynasty there were food fads. Historians still argue whether turtle-shaped boxes originated from noble banquet traditions or street prank culture. On the edge of the square, a young artist sketches people with their takeaway boxes. He says he's cataloging them like butterflies. He points out that people's identities seem to be reflected in their boxes. The bold ones go for spice-laden stacks, the shy ones mild broths with tofu, the romantics always lotus-wrapped rice. You pass a woman who's purposely opened her takeaway box where everyone can see. It contains a rare delicacy, candied chrysanthemum petals and fried bird tongues. She doesn't eat it immediately. She just lets it sit there, a conversation starter, an edible boast. Imported from the coast, she murmurs casually to no one in particular. A poet leans against a pillar reading his verses aloud while nibbling from a humble clay container. When asked why he doesn't get a fancy box, he grins. Food tastes better when it knows you worked for it. Whether that's true or not is debatable, but he earns a few approving nods. In a shaded corner, you spot a rebellious youth eating straight from a folded banana leaf. No box, just hand-wrapped dumplings with chili paste leaking through. He mutters something about authenticity and rejecting consumerism. Apparently, there's even a growing underground trend against the perceived over-fancification of takeaway boxes. At the river dock, merchants offload imported spices and ingredients, star anise, cinnamon bark, even dried durian. A woman waits anxiously for her custom box of Southern heat cuisine. She believes her spice-heavy meals connect her to her ancestral homeland. Food as identity is nothing new, but the box carries it in palm-sized poetry. You eavesdrop on a heated debate between two nobles. One claims that the curved lid style is superior for soup containment, while the other insists the flat-top model stacks better during travel. A third man interrupts, claiming he's designed a box with internal bracing to separate textures. Crunchy stays crunchy, he says proudly. The others scoff. You finally rest under a canopy and share a meal with a street dancer between performances. Her box is colorful, mismatched, patched together from leftovers and vendor scraps, yet it holds everything: flavor, sustenance, warmth. She shrugs and says style's great, but the real flex is still being fed. Around you, it's clear takeaway boxes aren't just practical anymore. They're cultural mirrors, identity statements in bamboo, wood, and lacquer. Whether it's gold-plated or banana-wrapped, your box says something about you, even if that something is just, "I was hungry." You wander beyond the city's bustling core, now past the last vendor stall where the streets stretch thinner and quieter. Out here, the takeaway box takes on yet another form, neither luxury nor novelty, but something more enduring, a piece of memory, a ritual, a relic of farewell. You approach a wayside inn where travelers rest before venturing into the mountains. The innkeeper wraps boxed meals for the road, simple dishes, hearty and durable. Rice balls lacquered in soy-pickled radish, dried pork strips, each item chosen to last the journey, to resist spoilage, to offer comfort miles away from home. One traveler fingers his box reverently before tying it to his pack. It's from his wife, who folded the parchment lining herself and slipped in a pressed flower beside the steamed buns. He doesn't eat until he's halfway through the pass. When he does, he whispers her name between bites. Further down the trail, a courier from Dunhuang unwraps a box while seated atop a boulder. He shares that he's carried similar boxes through sandstorms and sleet, over desert and gorge. A good box doesn't just carry food, he says. It carries a promise to return, or sometimes to remember. You meet a retired general near a shrine, dressed in plain robes now. He carries a lacquered box that once held battlefield rations. We used to etch messages into the lids, he tells you. Orders, poems, goodbyes. Some of those boxes ended up in graves, others in museums. Historians still argue whether the poetry was meant for morale or mourning. A child nearby opens her lunchbox carefully, untying the silken cord. Her grandmother used to pack it for her, always with the same sweet tofu pudding tucked in a corner. I still make it the same way she says. Feels like she's still here. Food as grief, grief as memory, memory as meal. You visit a coastal fishing village where sailors keep their takeaway boxes aboard, lacquered in waterproof resin. One sailor insists his box has saved his life once by floating, once by carrying medicinal ginger through a bout of food poisoning. Call it superstition, he laughs. But I never sail without it. In a hilltop monastery, monks prepare boxes for offerings to wandering hermits. These aren't mass-prepared, but assembled slowly, each grain of rice hand-washed. One monk tells you the takeaway box is an act of compassion, a quiet thread that binds the settled to the wandering. No return expected, just shared humanity. A grieving widow offers meals in engraved boxes during her husband's memorial. Each guest takes one home, eats in silence, then returns the box with a message written inside. He loved feeding people, she says. Now they feed him with memory. You watch as a child draws a cat inside her box's lid. A historian shows you a collection of antique takeaway boxes. Some are centuries old, etched with dates and destinations. Others bear smudged fingerprints, grease stains, even blood. We study these like letters, she says, not just for what they carried, but who they carried it to. Back in the city, a young couple prepares a meal for their aging parents. Each item chosen has a story, a childhood dish, a marriage day stew, a festival snack. They seal it in a handcrafted box and send it by courier. Not because the parents need the food, but because they know what it means. As dusk settles, you sit with a takeaway box of your own beneath the shadow of a banyan tree. Inside there's a little of everything: salt and sweetness, warmth and spice. You realize then that the box in your hands is more than just a container. It's a time capsule, a love letter, a final hello, or an enduring goodbye. As stars prick the deepening sky above Chang'an, you find yourself drifting toward the university district. Here, surrounded by scrolls, ink pots, and minds that never quite sleep. The takeaway box has taken on a life of its own. It's no longer just about eating, it's about thinking, arguing, philosophizing, preferably while chewing on something saucy. You trail behind a trio of students deep in debate, each holding a takeaway box like a philosopher's stone. One box contains sliced duck marinated in plum wine, another steamed buns stuffed with gingered mushrooms, and the third crispy tofu cubes glistening with sweet soy. The topic: whether the box is a symbol of bureaucracy or rebellion. One of them points out that boxes reflect hierarchy: commoners with folded leaves, nobles with gold-etched lacquer, monks with minimalist compartments. The other counters that the portability of food democratizes taste. Everyone's eating on the go, she says. That's revolution on four corners. Historians still argue whether this era's culinary portability changed class boundaries or just camouflaged them. In a corner tea house, you meet a professor who teaches an entire course on food packaging aesthetics. He shows you his personal takeaway box collection, some shaped like miniature pagodas, others embossed with Tang poems. He pauses over a cracked bamboo lid and mutters, "This one got me through my divorce." You sip plum tea while listening to a heated poetry reading. The theme tonight: meals in motion. Each poet shares an ode to a specific takeaway box: a morning after heartbreak, a rainy walk home, a stolen bite behind a shrine. You realize you're watching an entire subculture form: gourmet nostalgia with a wax paper twist. Out on the dormitory lawns, enterprising students run late-night pop-up stalls. They've reimagined the traditional box: collapsible, heat-retaining, sometimes with double lids, to separate soup from solid. One brags about a new hinge system that prevents accidental leaks during horse rides. You wonder briefly if he's failed his physics class just to perfect the hinge. A visiting monk gives a guest lecture on the ethics of takeout consumption. He gently argues that meals removed from context, without gratitude or presence, lose spiritual value. He passes around a humble clay box filled with plain millet. "Savor this," he says, "even the silence between bites." You chew slower after that. You pass a study circle cramming for civil exams. Their takeaway boxes are purely functional. No frills, just rice, pickled mustard greens, and salted duck egg. Still, there's camaraderie in the mess. One student insists he only eats with the same box his father used before failing the exam 3 times. It's lucky he deadpans. In the library, tucked between scroll stacks, a scribe quietly sketches his dream. Takeaway box design. One shaped like a dragon tail curled into a sauce well. He wants it to sing when opened. Just a small musical box of pork buns, he murmurs. Some ideas you think are ahead of their time. As midnight nears, students gather around lanterns and unbox their meals like offerings. There's laughter, tears, and that peculiar bond that forms when you share something small, warm, and oily at an ungodly hour. Someone plays a flute. Someone spills vinegar. Someone proposes to someone else using a fortune cookie made of candied lotus. A scholar quietly wraps up his leftovers in waxed silk and marks today's date on the inside of his box. I want to remember this conversation, he says, even though no one is around. It dawns on you that takeaway boxes have become more than carriers of food. They're diaries, chapters of lives bound not with string, but with spice and memory. You stretch under a plum blossom tree, your latest box beside you, half-eaten dumplings, the lid stained with sesame oil. You think of everyone who's ever eaten this way before you and everyone who will after. Just a meal on the move, a portable echo of something more permanent than even parchment. By morning, you're back where it all began, just outside the city gates, where delivery carts roll out like clockwork, where steam escapes from bamboo lids, and where the aroma of spiced pork mingles with morning dew. The cycle continues. Meals are made, packed, sent, and opened. But now you see something different in every box. You follow a courier named Jian, who has been running meals across Chang'an for 15 years. His cart is a patchwork of eras-old baskets, new lacquered cubes, experimental heat traps. He tells you each box is a secret, a meal sure but also a message. Some people say more with food than they ever do with words. He points to a red cord wrapped around one package. That means love or guilt. Depends on the sender. Another box tied with an intricate double loop suggests diplomacy. That one's going to a scholar who insulted a merchant. He's getting extra chilly, too. You begin to wonder how many arguments have been soothed or inflamed by the precise seasoning of a boxed meal. Down a narrow alley, you find a group of children playing delivery. Their wooden toys mimic real takeaway boxes, complete with little compartments and lids that snap shut. One girl declares herself Empress of Takeout, while another insists she's invented air dumplings that float to the customer's door. Honestly, give her 20 years. In the city archive, scribes catalog takeaway box records like rare texts. Some entries note who packed the meal, who received it, and what reaction it drew. One file describes a meal sent to a prisoner, rice, salted plum, and an apology carved into the lid. Historians still argue whether that box ever made it inside the walls. You trace the design of boxes across different neighborhoods. In the Eastern Merchant Quarter, they favor sleek containers with hidden spice compartments. The Southern districts, more ornate painted lids, miniature ink stamps of family crests. Rural designs, by contrast, prioritize function-woven grass, resin-sealed leaves, and padded straps to hang over oxen's necks. You meet a street artist who paints takeaway boxes discarded in the river. She fishes them out, dries them, then turns each one into a miniature canvas. These carried food, she tells you, but now they carry stories. Some I imagine, some I remember. All of them feel like home. A blind musician in the market square taps on an old bamboo box as a makeshift drum, singing folk tales between bites of sticky rice. He claims it once held a feast from the emperor himself, but no one quite believes him. Still, you tap your fingers along with the rhythm. Stranger things have happened in this city. You sit with a retiring chef who's boxed tens of thousands of meals over her lifetime. Her hands are worn, her eyes soft. "Every meal that leaves my kitchen is a goodbye," she whispers, "even if it comes back." She keeps one takeaway box on her mantel, plain wooden, burned with her daughter's initials. Even now, artisans in back streets and studios experiment with new materials: recyclable parchment made from lotus fiber, foldable boxes scented with herbs to ward off insects, even edible packaging for festival treats. One boy, barely 10, pitches you his invention, a soup box with built-in chopsticks that dissolve into candy. You sincerely hope he files a patent. The Tang Dynasty is already legendary for its poetry, its bureaucracy, its cosmopolitan swirl. But as you reflect now, you can't help but feel that one of its quietest legacies might be these humble boxes. Born from practicality, they evolved into instruments of culture, empathy, even resistance. Containers, yes, but also vessels of flavor, of feeling, of time. And as you watch the sun rise over Chang'an one last time with a warm takeaway box resting on your lap, you realize every box tells a story. Tonight you heard just one of them. Tomorrow another begins with you somewhere else opening a lid. Now that the last story has been packed and sealed, let's take a moment to let everything settle. You're still in the heart of the Tang Dynasty, though the streets have grown quiet and the lanterns have dimmed. The flavors still linger faintly in the air: soy and ginger star, anise and plum. But their intensity has softened, just like your breath. You feel the echo of wheels turning slowly over stone, the soft clink of lids being closed, the last murmurs of night vendors cleaning up their stalls. Even the memory of that warm takeaway box on your lap is beginning to fade into something hazier, like a dream half remembered when you wake. Let your shoulders drop. You don't need to follow the carts anymore. You don't have to track every recipe or every message scrawled into a wooden lid. You've walked far, sat with emperors and orphans, heard laughter, grief, invention, and poetry, all through a box meant to carry something warm from one heart to another. And now it's time to rest. Let your thoughts float gently like steam rising off jasmine rice. Let your breathing match the rhythm of distant footsteps fading into mist. Let the weight of the day melt into the softness of your pillow as if it were lined with fresh parchment and nestled in a lacquered box of its own. You're safe. The lid is closed. The story is done for now. Good night, traveler.